I gave my daughter the family home, a place brimming with memories. Her first words after were, "When are you moving out, Mom?" Then she pointed to the dusty garage, suggesting it was all I needed. The chill that ran through me wasn't just from the concrete. I smiled. You won't believe what happened next. Like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. Evelyn, at 65, found herself adrift in the cavernous silence of their colonial home. Arthur, her beloved husband, had been gone for 3 years, his laughter and warmth replaced by the echo of her own footsteps. He had always been pragmatic, even in love, often advising, "Evelyn, my dear, give with warm hands." There's no joy in posthumous generosity. She had honored his memory in countless small ways. But now, a bigger gesture felt right. A final, tangible act of devotion to his philosophy and her family. The house, once vibrant with the chaos of 3 growing children, felt too large, too quiet, a monument to a life once shared. It was time to simplify, to lighten her own load, and to ensure her children were secure. The day she chose for the distribution of her assets was crisp and bright, much like Arthur himself. Charlotte, her eldest, arrived precisely at 2 o'clock. Her tailored blazer and neat bob a testament to her punctuality and demanding career. Benjamin, her only son, followed shortly after, his usual boisterous energy subdued by an unfamiliar nervousness. Clara, her youngest, a compassionate pediatric nurse, completed the trio, her gentle smile a comforting presence. They gathered in the living room, a space usually reserved for holidays and major family announcements. The air hummed with unspoken questions as Evelyn, seated in Arthur's favorite armchair, cleared her throat. "I've gathered you all here today," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "because I've decided to distribute my wealth now, while I'm still able to witness the good it can do." A collective gasp filled the room, a mixture of surprise and anticipation. Evelyn looked at each of her children, a silent prayer of love passing between them. "Charlotte," she began, turning to her eldest, "you've always been so responsible, so committed to family. This home, the one we built together, the one you grew up in, it's yours." A flash, quick as lightning, crossed Charlotte's face. Not surprise, but something akin to triumphant expectation, quickly masked by a polite smile and a murmured, "Thank you, Mother. That's generous." Evelyn felt a faint prickle of unease, but dismissed it. Charlotte had always been a formidable character. Next, she turned to Benjamin. "My dear boy, you've always had a good head for business, but perhaps not always the luckiest hand." She offered him the hefty investment portfolio Arthur had meticulously built, along with their cherished vacation property in Maine, a rustic cabin nestled by a serene lake. Benjamin's eyes, usually so guarded, welled up. He'd always loved that cabin, a place of freedom and fishing trips with his father. "Mom," he choked out, This means the world to me. Thank you." His genuine emotion softened the room, melting away some of the earlier tension. Evelyn smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. This was the warm hands Arthur had spoken of. Finally, she turned to Clara. "And Clara, my sweet girl, your dedication to healing, to caring for those tiny, fragile lives, it inspires me every day." Evelyn presented her with the downtown rental properties, a steady stream of income, and the entirety of her personal savings. "I know you've always dreamed of opening your own pediatric clinic, a place where you can truly make a difference without the bureaucracy of the big hospitals. This is for that dream." Clara's eyes shone with unshed tears, her gentle hands reaching for Evelyn's. "Oh, Mama," she whispered, "this is incredible. Thank you. I promise I'll make you proud." The sincerity in Clara's gratitude was a balm to Evelyn's soul. The legal papers, meticulously prepared by Evelyn's attorney, were signed that afternoon, making the transfers official and irrevocable. A sense of finality, both liberating and slightly daunting, settled over Evelyn. Later, they gathered for a celebratory dinner, a feast she had prepared with care. Laughter filled the dining room once more, a fleeting return to happier times. Benjamin regaled them with childhood anecdotes from the main cabin, and Clara shared her burgeoning plans for the clinic. Charlotte, though more reserved, offered toasts and compliments, her demeanor impeccable. Evelyn watched them, her heart full, believing she had done right by them, by Arthur's memory. As the evening wound down, and Benjamin and Clara were bundling up to leave, Charlotte lingered. She helped Evelyn clear the table, her movements efficient and precise. Just as Evelyn was wiping down the counter, Charlotte paused, her back to Evelyn. "So, Mom," she said casually, almost as an afterthought, "when do you think you'll move out?" The sponge slipped from Evelyn's grasp, clattering softly onto the porcelain sink. The sound seemed deafening in the sudden quiet. Evelyn stared at her daughter's back, a cold knot forming in her stomach. "Move out?" she echoed, her voice barely a whisper. I hadn't really thought about it. I assumed I would stay, at least for a while." The house was enormous. Why would she leave? Charlotte turned, her expression unreadable. "Oh, Mom, don't be silly. This is my house now. You can't possibly expect to stay in a 4-bedroom colonial by yourself. It's just not practical." Before Evelyn could respond, Charlotte took her arm, leading her out of the kitchen and through the back door into the attached garage. It was a space full of Arthur's lingering presence, his tools neatly arranged on pegboards, the scent of sawdust and motor oil still faintly clinging to the air. "I've been thinking," Charlotte continued, her voice gaining a detached, almost clinical tone. "Arthur's workshop would be perfect for you. We can convert it into a small studio apartment, a separate entrance, a little kitchenette. All very private." Evelyn's gaze swept across the familiar space, filled with the ghosts of Arthur's hobbies, his unfinished projects. Her own daughter was proposing to relegate her to a garage, a space designed for cars and tools, not for the woman who had nurtured her, who had just given her everything. "After all," Charlotte stated, her voice devoid of warmth, "the garage is all you need, Mom. You don't require much space anymore, do you?" The chill that ran through Evelyn was colder than the concrete floor beneath her feet. It wasn't just the words, but the flat, unfeeling way they were delivered. The walls of the garage, once a symbol of Arthur's industriousness, now seemed to press in on her, suffocating her. She was being exiled from her own home, by her own flesh and blood, the child she had loved and provided for. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her daughter, to whom she had just gifted her most precious possession, was stripping her of her dignity, her comfort, her very sense of belonging. Evelyn could only stand there, mute, her mind reeling. Charlotte, oblivious or uncaring of the profound hurt she inflicted, continued, "I've already spoken to a contractor. He can start next week." Alone that night, in the vast, suddenly hostile emptiness of the home she no longer owned, Evelyn sat on her bed, numb. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the frantic beat of her own heart. She looked around at the familiar furnishings, each piece a memory, now tainted by Charlotte's words. Had she made a terrible mistake? Had her warm hands been too warm? Too naive? The warmth of the celebratory dinner, the glow of family connection, had vanished, replaced by an icy dread. Her dignity, her sense of self, felt utterly stripped away, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. A single, silent tear traced a path down her wrinkled cheek, a testament to the profound betrayal she felt. The 2 weeks that followed the asset distribution felt less like a passage of time, and more like a descent into a surreal, isolating dream. Evelyn now stood in what Charlotte had dubbed her suite, but which was unmistakably the garage, hastily and minimally renovated. The concrete floor, now covered with a thin, cheap rug, still seeped an undeniable chill. A twin bed, narrow and unforgiving, replaced her queen-sized haven. A small, functional dresser and a nightstand, both clearly new and inexpensive, held the few belongings she had been allowed to keep. In the corner, behind a flimsy shower curtain, was her makeshift bathroom. A toilet and a small corner sink, utterly devoid of the warmth and space she had grown accustomed to. It felt less like a home and more like a temporary holding cell. From the single, high-set window of her new suite, Evelyn watched, a silent, helpless observer, as her life was systematically dismantled. Moving trucks, hired by Charlotte, backed up to the main house. One by one, her antique furniture, pieces she and Arthur had collected over a lifetime, each imbued with stories and memories, were carefully, or perhaps not so carefully, carried out. The mahogany dining table where countless family dinners had been shared, the velvet armchair where Arthur had read his newspapers, the ornate cabinet displaying their wedding china, all vanished, whisked away to some unknown destination. When Evelyn had tentatively inquired, Charlotte had simply waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Mom, they're just too dated. We're redecorating, you know. Going for a more modern aesthetic." The word dated felt like a direct assault on her past, on her very being. Another small yet significant indignity occurred the very first day. Evelyn, still operating on instinct, reached for her old house key, intending to let herself into the main house for a cup of tea. It wouldn't turn. Confused, she tried again, jiggling the lock with increasing frustration. Charlotte, emerging from the house with a bright plastic smile, had explained with an air of faux concern. "Oh, Mom, didn't I tell you? We changed the locks. For security, you know. Much safer this way. You'll need to use the garage door from now on." The implication was clear. Evelyn was no longer an inhabitant, but a visitor, confined to her separate, secure space. Her access to her former home was now restricted. Inside her garage suite, another feature awaited her: a miniature refrigerator, barely large enough for a few essentials. No full-sized fridge, no access to the main kitchen. It was as though she had regressed to her college dorm days, an independent young woman living on ramen and instant coffee. Not a 65-year-old mother who had once presided over a bustling household. The humiliation of it burned, a slow, steady ember in her chest. Charlotte, ever the pragmatist, had also laid down some ground rules for her children, Liam, 10, and Olivia, 8. Evelyn overheard her one afternoon, her voice clear and firm. "Now, kids, Grandma needs her quiet time. You are to leave Grandma alone when she's in her room, understand? She has her own space now." The children, usually so eager for Grandma's stories and cookies, suddenly kept their distance, their little faces reflecting a mixture of confusion and instruction following obedience. Evelyn felt a pang, not just for herself, but for the erosion of that cherished bond. One Tuesday morning, the veneer of Charlotte's carefully constructed world cracked slightly. The nanny, it turned out, was sick. Charlotte, flustered and agitated, appeared at Evelyn's garage door. "Mom," she began, her tone a brittle mix of command and desperation, "I really need you to babysit Liam and Olivia today. I have an absolutely crucial lunch meeting, and I simply cannot reschedule." Evelyn, despite the gnawing resentment, couldn't refuse her grandchildren. She agreed, stepping into the grand house that felt both familiar and alien. By noon, the children, full of morning play, were predictably hungry. "Grandma, can we have some snacks?" Liam asked, his eyes wide. "I'm starving," Olivia echoed. Evelyn, forgetting for a moment her new reality, instinctively moved towards the kitchen, then stopped. She had no access, no food. She remembered her mini-fridge in the garage. "Let's see what Grandma has," she offered, trying to keep her voice light, leading them back to her suite. She opened the tiny fridge. Inside, there were precisely 2 items: a half-empty carton of milk and a package of stale crackers. "Oh," Liam said, his face falling. "Is that all?" Olivia looked utterly bewildered. Evelyn knelt down, trying to explain in terms they might understand. You see, darlings, she began, a lump forming in her throat. Grandma lives in here now. This house belongs to your mummy and daddy. So Grandma doesn't have food in their kitchen anymore. The explanation seemed to only confuse them further, their innocent eyes reflecting her own unspoken pain. But, Grandma, you always make us lunch, Olivia protested, her lip trembling. Evelyn's heart ached. She couldn't let them go hungry. Reaching for her purse, she pulled out her credit card. It was linked to the savings account she had so recently given to Clara, yet thankfully, still had a temporary grace period before the full transfer finalized. How about pizza? She suggested, forcing a bright smile. The children's faces instantly lit up. Yes! Pizza! They cheered, momentarily forgetting their confusion. The pizza arrived, hot and cheesy, a temporary reprieve from the gnawing hunger and the awkward explanation. The children devoured it with gusto, crumbs flying, laughter filling the kitchen once more. Evelyn watched them, a small, sad smile on her lips. She had provided for them, even if it meant dipping into the money she had meant for Clara's dream. Charlotte returned hours later, her important lunch meeting having clearly run over. She breezed in, her designer bag clutched in one hand, her smile faltering at the sight of the empty pizza boxes. Her brow furrowed, a disapproving line etched between her eyebrows. "Pizza, Mom?" she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Really? I thought you'd give them something healthy. You know how I feel about processed junk food for the kids." Evelyn, her patience worn thin, met Charlotte's gaze, her own eyes holding a weariness that belied her simple words. "They were hungry, Charlotte," she replied, her voice flat. "And I don't have access to the kitchen." Charlotte let out a dramatic sigh, a theatrical gesture that implied Evelyn should have somehow conjured a gourmet meal out of thin air. Or, worse, inconvenienced her with a phone call during her important meeting. The unspoken accusation hung heavy in the air. That night, Evelyn lay shivering in her narrow twin bed. The garage, uninsulated, offered little protection from the creeping evening cold. The chill permeated her bones, mirroring the coldness that had settled in her heart. She stared up at the unadorned ceiling, a canvas for her troubled thoughts. How had her life, so carefully built, so full of love and intention, gone so wrong, so quickly? The question echoed in the frigid silence, unanswered and heavy with regret. The biting cold of the uninsulated garage had done its damage. Evelyn woke the next morning, feeling utterly wretched. A high fever coursed through her, bringing with it bone-rattling chills that even her thin blanket couldn't combat. Her throat felt raw, like she had swallowed shards of glass, and her head throbbed with a relentless ache. She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced her back down onto the unforgiving twin bed. Her body ached, every joint protesting. With trembling hands, she fumbled for her phone. Her fingers, stiff with cold and fever, struggled to type out a message to Charlotte. "Charlotte, I'm really not well. High fever, chills. Could you please bring me some tea and maybe some Tylenol?" She waited, her gaze fixed on the phone screen, hoping for an immediate response, a flicker of concern. An hour passed, then 2, then 3. The screen remained dark. She tried calling, but her calls went straight to voicemail, each automated message a fresh sting of rejection. The thought of dragging herself to the main house, knocking on the door, and begging for help filled her with a profound sense of shame and exhaustion. Desperate, and fighting against a rising panic, Evelyn knew she couldn't rely on Charlotte. She typed out another message, this time to Benjamin and Clara, trying to downplay the severity, not wanting to burden them, yet needing their help. "Feeling a bit under the weather. Kids. Just a bad cold, I think. Could one of you check in on me if you have a moment?" Benjamin's reply came swiftly, a regretful text. "So sorry, Mom. I'm in Boston for a conference all week. Can't possibly get away. Hope you feel better soon." Another wave of disappointment washed over Evelyn. Benjamin, always so busy, so focused on his career. It wasn't entirely his fault, but it still hurt. Clara, however, called immediately. Her voice, usually so gentle, was laced with concern. Mom, what's wrong? You sound awful. Is Charlotte not there? Evelyn tried to reassure her, but her voice was hoarse and weak, betraying her true condition. Clara's distress was palpable. Mom, why isn't Charlotte helping you? This isn't right. She promised to call Charlotte directly, her indignation clear even through the phone line. Barely an hour later, the garage door creaked open. Charlotte stood there, a vision of carefully assembled composure, holding a box of Tylenol and a mug of what looked like lukewarm tea. She didn't step fully inside, maintaining a noticeable distance, as if Evelyn's illness might be contagious through the very air. Amber said you're sick, Charlotte stated, her eyes barely meeting Evelyn's. Amber was the nanny, Evelyn realized, the one who usually cared for the children. It seemed Charlotte hadn't noticed her mother's illness until someone else pointed it out. There's some soup in the microwave for later, she added, placing the items on the small nightstand, careful not to touch anything else. She didn't check Evelyn's temperature, didn't ask how she felt, didn't offer a single word of comfort. She simply turned and left, the garage door closing with a soft thud, leaving Evelyn once again in the isolating silence. Evelyn lay there, the Tylenol and tea untouched, tears welling in her eyes. Her heart ached more than her fevered body. How had her bright, vivacious daughter, the girl she had raised with so much love, become so cold, so distant, so utterly devoid of empathy? Was she truly a burden now? Had she, by giving away everything, somehow made herself worthless in Charlotte's eyes? The questions spun in her feverish mind, each one a fresh stab of pain. The next day, the fever had finally broken, leaving Evelyn weak but clear-headed. Her body still felt bruised, but her spirit felt utterly crushed. She knew she couldn't stay in bed, dwelling on her heartbreak. With a sigh, she slowly, painfully, rose. The garage, filled with boxes that had been unceremoniously dumped after the house purge, seemed to mock her. There was nothing else to do. She might as well start sorting through them, try to bring some order to this chaotic new chapter of her life. She began with a large, unlabeled box in the corner, filled with old photographs and miscellaneous documents. As she carefully sifted through the items, her hand brushed against something solid and familiar, an old cedar chest. It was a sturdy, beautifully crafted box, dark wood with intricate carvings, and a small brass lock. Arthur had kept it in his study, always locked, always a quiet mystery. Evelyn had never seen inside it, respecting his privacy, assuming it held old business papers or personal mementos. A memory stirred. Arthur, with a knowing twinkle in his eye, had once remarked, "The key to my cedar chest, my dear, is always with my cufflinks. But only open it if you truly need to." Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, picturing Arthur's dresser, the small tray where he kept his cufflinks. She knew with a certainty that chilled her, that Charlotte, in her ruthless efficiency to modernize, would have long since discarded Arthur's old, dated accessories, along with everything else. The key was undoubtedly gone. Yet, a spark of determination ignited within her. She rummaged through her small purse, finding a sturdy hairpin. A faint, almost forgotten memory surfaced. Benjamin, in his rebellious teenage phase, had briefly developed an obsession with lockpicking. Fascinated by the mechanics of it, he had once shown her a simple trick for opening basic locks, just for fun. A little wiggle, a little pressure. With a surprising surge of focus, Evelyn worked the hairpin into the lock. She felt a faint click, then another. With a gentle push, the heavy cedar lid creaked open. A musty, woody scent wafted out. Inside, she found stacks of photo albums, some she had never seen before, documenting Arthur's life before her and others that chronicled their early years together. There were also bundles of documents, tied with faded ribbons, and at the very bottom, nestled beneath everything else, a thick, cream-colored envelope. Her name, Evelyn, was written across it in Arthur's familiar, elegant script. Below her name, in slightly smaller letters, was an instruction that sent a shiver down her spine. To be opened when all seems lost. Evelyn's hands trembled as she held the envelope. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Arthur? Her pragmatic, insightful Arthur. Could he have possibly foreseen this? Her current predicament, her utter desolation, her feeling of having lost everything? The weight of the envelope in her hand felt immense. A silent message from beyond the grave, promising either a final comfort or a devastating revelation. With trembling fingers, Evelyn broke the wax seal on the cream-colored envelope. The faint scent of Arthur's old pipe tobacco seemed to emanate from the aged paper, a ghostly comfort. She carefully unfolded the letter, her eyes blurring instantly as she recognized his familiar, elegant script, a steady hand that had guided her through decades of life. The first words on the page confirmed her deepest fears, yet also offered a glimmer of understanding. "My dearest Evelyn," it began, "if you are reading this, I am gone, and I strongly suspect that something has gone terribly wrong. Please know, my love, that I always adored your trusting nature, your boundless generosity, but I also understood it could be, at times, a vulnerability." Evelyn's breath hitched. Arthur, ever the astute observer, had seen it all. He had seen Charlotte's burgeoning ambition, a hunger that seemed to grow with each passing year, overshadowing her sense of familial duty. He had noted Benjamin's tendency to hesitate, to avoid conflict, to often choose the path of least resistance, even when it meant overlooking discomfort. And he had recognized Clara's gentle nature, her struggle to find her own voice, often deferring to her more assertive siblings. He had seen the fault lines in their perfect family portrait, fault lines Evelyn, in her unwavering love, had often chosen to ignore. "I have, for some time, prepared for this very possibility." Arthur's letter continued, his words a lifeline in her sea of despair. "Because, my sweet Evelyn, you were always too trusting, too quick to believe in the best of people, especially your own children. I made provisions, knowing you might one day need them." Evelyn's eyes scanned the page, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and burgeoning hope. He revealed that everything she had so recently given away, everything she believed was irrevocably lost, could be reclaimed. There was a crucial legal clause, he explained, embedded within the very documents she had signed. "Look closely, my love, at page 4, paragraph 3, subsection B, of the transfer deeds. It states, in no uncertain terms, that all transfers of property and assets are contingent on your continued well-being, and, crucially, your respectful treatment by the beneficiaries." A gasp escaped Evelyn's lips. Respectful treatment. The words echoed in her mind, a stark contrast to the garage, the locked doors, the lukewarm tea, the casual dismissal. Arthur had seen it coming. He had known. He went on to explain, "Mr. Davies, our lawyer, a man of quiet integrity, insisted on including this clause. I asked him not to highlight it during the signing, knowing you would balk at such a protective measure against your own children. I knew you would rather believe in their inherent goodness. But it is there, Evelyn, and it is ironclad." Arthur hadn't stopped there. His foresight was truly astonishing. Furthermore, the letter continued, "There is a safety deposit box at the First National Bank. Account number 473. The key is hidden in a false bottom of this very cedar chest. Inside, you will find the deeds to a modest, charming property at 1752 Willow Creek Road. I purchased it 5 years ago, shortly after my diagnosis, as a quiet retreat, a place where you could always feel safe and unburdened, should the need arise. It's small, but it's yours. Truly yours, with no strings attached." Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. He had been planning for this, For her, even as his own life was slipping away. You will also find accounts with substantial funds, Arthur's letter concluded. Funds completely unknown to the children. These are for you, Evelyn, to live with dignity and comfort, on your own terms. Please, my love, protect yourself. Love is given freely. Yes, but respect must be earned. Do not let misplaced guilt or maternal obligation diminish you, or allow anyone to treat you as less than the remarkable woman you are. Be strong, my Evelyn. I am always with you. Evelyn pressed the letter to her chest, the paper crinkling against her skin. A deep, wrenching sob finally broke free, but it was not a sob of despair. It was a cry of profound gratitude, of relief, of a crushing weight suddenly lifting from her shoulders. Arthur, her brilliant, loving Arthur, had reached out from beyond the grave to save her. Hope, a feeling she hadn't known she still possessed, surged through her veins, warm and bright. Wiping her eyes, her gaze fell upon the cedar chest. Arthur had mentioned a false bottom. She ran her fingers along the smooth interior, feeling for an imperfection, a seam. There, along the back edge, a subtle groove. With a determined push, a small section of wood lifted, revealing a tiny compartment. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, lay a small brass key, gleaming faintly. Etched into its head were the numbers 473. With new purpose, Evelyn returned to the pile of legal documents she had received upon the distribution. Her eyes, sharper now, scanned the pages. She found the section, just as Arthur had described. Page 4. Paragraph 3. Subsection B. There it was, in clear, unambiguous legal jargon. The clause stating that the transfers were expressly conditional upon the continued provision of respectful and dignified care for the grantor, Evelyn May Thompson, and her ongoing access to all necessary comforts and amenities befitting her previous standard of living, as determined solely by the grantor. The power to revoke, to reclaim, was hers. Arthur had not only provided an escape, he had provided the means to fight back. If you're finding Evelyn's story captivating, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow her journey as she reclaims her life and finds her strength. The next morning, a crisp dawn broke, illuminating the dusty interior of Evelyn's garage suite. But this morning was different. The debilitating fever was gone, replaced by a quiet, simmering resolve that Arthur's letter had ignited. She moved with a newfound purpose, gathering her meager belongings into a single tote bag. Without a word to Charlotte, without a backward glance at the main house that had become her prison, Evelyn stepped out into the chilly air and called a taxi. The old Evelyn, hesitant and easily diminished, had been left behind on the narrow twin bed. The taxi deposited her in front of the imposing marble facade of the First National Bank. Inside, the hushed elegance of the lobby seemed to welcome her, a stark contrast to the utilitarian coldness of her recent accommodations. After a brief wait, a discreet bank employee led her to a private viewing room. With the key marked 473 clutched in her hand, Evelyn opened the safety deposit box. Arthur's foresight, his unwavering love, lay neatly organized before her. There were the pristine deeds to the Willow Creek Road property, bank statements detailing accounts with sums far more substantial than she had ever imagined, and a small, unassuming set of keys. A wave of emotion, raw and profound, washed over her. He had truly thought of everything. From the bank, Evelyn directed the taxi driver. 1752 Willow Creek Road, please. The address, once just a name on a piece of paper, now represented freedom, a tangible future. Her heart, which had been heavy with despair for weeks, now beat with a nervous, exhilarating rhythm. They drove away from the manicured lawns of her former neighborhood, turning onto a quieter, tree-lined street. The leaves, just beginning to turn golden, whispered in the gentle breeze, as if welcoming her. And then she saw it. A modest, charming ranch house, its pale blue shutters a cheerful accent against the white siding. A small, well-tended garden, though currently dormant, promised blossoms in the spring. It wasn't grand, not like the colonial she had given away, but it exuded a welcoming warmth, a quiet dignity that felt like a balm to her battered soul. Tears, hot and unexpected, sprang to her eyes, blurring the cheerful blue. This wasn't just a house. It was her sanctuary, a haven meticulously crafted by Arthur, just for her, a final testament to his enduring love and protection. The key slid smoothly into the lock. The door opened to reveal a house that was impeccably clean, filled with the faint, comforting scent of fresh paint and wood, but utterly unfurnished. It was a blank canvas, waiting for her to infuse it with her own memories, her own choices, to truly make it a home again. Evelyn walked through the 3 cozy bedrooms, each with ample light, imagining which would be her own. The 2 pristine bathrooms, sparkling with new fixtures, offered a welcome luxury after the makeshift corner of her garage. The kitchen, modern and bright, with gleaming countertops and state-of-the-art appliances, was a world away from the forbidden kitchen in Charlotte's house. And then there was the sunroom, bathed in natural light, overlooking a small, private backyard. It was perfect. She could picture herself there, sipping tea, reading a book, feeling the warmth on her skin. Evelyn spent hours simply sitting on the floor in the empty living room, the silence broken only by the gentle creaks of the old house settling around her. The weight of Arthur's letter, her newly discovered power, and the sheer beauty of this unexpected gift pressed upon her. Should she confront Charlotte, wield the legal claws like a sword, and reclaim what was rightfully hers? Or should she simply disappear, start fresh, and leave the bitterness behind? The thought of a confrontation, the inevitable ugliness, still daunted her, despite her newfound strength. But the thought of simply walking away, letting Charlotte believe she had won, felt like a betrayal of Arthur's careful planning, a betrayal of herself. She needed time to plan, time to strengthen her resolve. In the late afternoon, with the sun beginning to dip below the horizon, Evelyn reluctantly locked the door to her new sanctuary. It was too soon. She needed to return to the garage, to make her plans in secret, to gather her remaining belongings without Charlotte's interference. She hailed another taxi, directing it back to the house that was no longer hers. As she stepped out of the taxi and approached the garage door, Charlotte was waiting, arms crossed, a frown etched deeply on her face. Her voice, sharp and demanding, cut through the evening air. "Where have you been, Mom? I've been calling. You just disappeared." Evelyn met her daughter's gaze, a quiet confidence settling in her chest. The old Evelyn would have mumbled an apology, offered an explanation. But not this Evelyn. "Personal matters, Charlotte," she replied, her voice calm and even, devoid of the usual deference. Charlotte's frown deepened, a flicker of something akin to worry, or perhaps inconvenience, in her eyes. "Well, you should inform me when you're leaving, especially if you're not going to be available. What if I needed you for the kids?" The subtle accusation hung in the air, a clear indication that Charlotte saw her mother primarily as a convenient resource. "And speaking of which," Charlotte continued, moving seamlessly from complaint to demand, "I think we need to formalize our arrangement, Mom." With a written agreement, Evelyn's heart hardened. This was it. The final commodification. "A written agreement?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the turmoil within. "Yes," Charlotte stated, her tone firm and businesslike. "To clarify your responsibilities. Helping with the kids, of course. Light housekeeping in the main house, running errands, and the gardening. It would be mutually beneficial, don't you think? You're here anyway." The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow, yet they no longer crushed her spirit. Instead, they fueled a cold, quiet rage. Charlotte saw her not as a mother, not as a person with dignity, but as an unpaid domestic, a convenient, live-in maid. The realization, stark and undeniable, solidified Evelyn's resolve. There would be no fresh start for Charlotte. Justice, for Arthur's memory and for her own stripped dignity, had to be served. As Charlotte turned to walk back into the main house, she paused at the threshold, glancing over her shoulder. "Oh, and Mom," she said, her voice casual, almost an afterthought. "My friends are coming over for dinner tomorrow night. Could you make your famous lasagna? You know how much everyone loves it." The demand, tossed over her shoulder with such easy expectation, was the final straw. Evelyn watched the door close, a steely glint in her eyes. Lasagna, indeed. Evelyn awoke the next morning to the same familiar chill of the garage, but the cold no longer pierced her heart. Instead, it fueled a quiet, steady determination that had replaced the helplessness she had carried for weeks. The decision had been made. She would not sign Charlotte's insulting agreement. She would reclaim her dignity, her home, her life. But she would do it strategically, methodically, just as Arthur would have done. She met Charlotte's demands with a pleasant smile, a mask of cheerful compliance. "Of course, dear," Evelyn said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'd be happy to make my lasagna for your friends." She played the role Charlotte expected, the accommodating, unassuming mother, buying herself precious time. That evening she cooked the lasagna, the familiar aromas filling the kitchen of her old home. A kitchen she was technically forbidden to access for her own meals. She even served it to Charlotte's friends, enduring Charlotte's casual, condescending remarks about her little garage apartment and how Mom really prefers her privacy now. Each word was a fresh insult. Yet Evelyn merely smiled, her resolve hardening with every bite of the delicious, unearned meal. The very next morning, Evelyn walked to the corner store, found a payphone, and called Mr. Davies's office. "I need an appointment this afternoon," she stated, her voice firm, surprising even herself. Mr. Davies, their long-standing family lawyer, was indeed surprised to hear from her, but his tone was one of immediate concern. He squeezed her in. At his office, surrounded by the scent of old leather and legal tomes, Evelyn recounted her tale, her voice calm and factual, devoid of melodrama. Mr. Davies listened intently, occasionally interjecting with a quiet nod. When she presented him with Arthur's letter and highlighted the clause, Section 4, Chapter 3b, he read it carefully, his brow furrowing slightly, then smoothing out with a look of quiet confirmation. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, his voice grave. "Your husband was a remarkably prescient man. This clause is perfectly valid and legally binding." He assured her that living in a poorly insulated garage, with limited access to the main house and its amenities, absolutely qualified as inappropriate accommodation and a clear violation of the respectful treatment stipulation. Mr. Davies then outlined the legal process, explaining the steps they would take to revoke the transfers. "Charlotte will not take this well, Mrs. Thompson," he warned, his gaze direct and serious. "She will fight. But you have a very strong case." Evelyn nodded, the warning doing nothing to deter her. She was ready. Over the next 2 weeks, Evelyn transformed herself from a victim into a meticulous investigator. She took discreet photos of the garage, the flimsy shower curtain, the twin bed, the single high window. She started a detailed journal, documenting every instance of Charlotte's dismissive behavior, every cold comment, every demand. She even managed to record a few key conversations on her phone, carefully hidden, capturing Charlotte's casual assumption of her mother's servitude. Simultaneously, she began preparing for her escape. Using the funds Arthur had so wisely secured for her, she opened new bank accounts, ensuring Charlotte had no access. She arranged for utilities at the Willow Creek house, and even installed a new, more robust security system, preparing her sanctuary for her imminent arrival. Evelyn also reached out, cautiously, to Benjamin and Clara. Benjamin, true to form, was distracted. He listened, somewhat vaguely, to her complaints about living in the garage, offering platitudes about Charlotte, meaning well and things probably being a bit chaotic. He was clearly uncomfortable with confrontation and seemed more interested in the new investment portfolio Arthur had left him. But Clara, her sweet, compassionate Clara, was a different story. "Mom, that's unacceptable," Clara exclaimed, her voice vibrating with outrage. "You gave her that house out of pure generosity, not so she could banish you to the garage like some unwanted pet. She offered unwavering support, promising to be there for Evelyn, no matter what." Clara's steadfast loyalty was a comfort, a confirmation that not all her children had been corrupted by greed. The day before the planned confrontation, Evelyn made a quiet pilgrimage. She took a taxi to the cemetery, standing before Arthur's grave. The marble headstone, adorned with fresh flowers from a previous visit, seemed to radiate his calm strength. "Thank you, Arthur," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me, for protecting me. I promise I will stand up for myself, just as you taught me to." She felt a surge of courage, a deep, abiding connection to her husband's wisdom. That evening, back in the garage, Evelyn meticulously arranged all her documentation, Arthur's letter, the copies of the transfer deeds, with the highlighted clause, the photos, the journal, the transcripts of the recorded conversations. It was all laid out. A damning indictment of Charlotte's cruelty. Then, with a steady hand, she sent 3 identical text messages. To Charlotte, to Benjamin, and to Clara. "Family meeting tomorrow, at 2 p.m. at Jessica's house." Jessica was a mutual friend of the family, her house a neutral territory for what promised to be an explosive gathering. Later that night, as she lay in the uncomfortable twin bed, Evelyn overheard Charlotte and her husband, David, through the thin garage door. Their voices, usually muffled, were unusually clear. "And what about Mom's old fixtures in the master bathroom?" Charlotte asked. "We really need to get those replaced. They're so dated." David grunted in agreement. "Yeah, definitely. Can't have that old stuff in our new master suite." The casual dismissal of her belongings, the gleeful anticipation of ripping out pieces of her past, solidified Evelyn's decision, cementing her resolve. They truly saw no value in her, only in what they could take from her. Tomorrow, that would change. The morning of the family meeting, Evelyn was awake long before dawn. The garage was still shrouded in a pre-sunrise gloom, but Evelyn felt a clarity, a sharpness of purpose that had been absent for too long. She rehearsed her words in the quiet darkness, honing her delivery, ensuring every sentence would land with the impact she intended. She carefully chose her attire, a simple, elegant navy blue dress, a timeless piece that always made her feel composed. And then, she reached for Arthur's pearl necklace, a gift from their 30th anniversary. Its cool weight, a comforting presence against her skin. She would appear dignified, unbowed. By noon, Clara arrived, her gentle face etched with worry. She found Evelyn at the garage door, dressed and ready. "Mom!" Clara cried, her eyes immediately scanning the cramped, cold space. She hugged Evelyn fiercely, a genuine warmth that melted some of the carefully constructed composure. "Oh, Mom," Clara whispered, pulling back, tears welling in her eyes as she took in the stark reality of Evelyn's living conditions. This is elder abuse. How could Charlotte do this?" Her outrage was a balm to Evelyn's soul, confirming that not everyone saw her as a disposable burden. Benjamin arrived 15 minutes late, true to his habit, looking harried and vaguely clueless. He mumbled apologies about traffic and a rescheduled conference call, completely oblivious to the palpable tension in the air. His eyes darted around, avoiding direct contact, sensing the unease but unwilling to acknowledge its source. They gathered in the familiar living room of Jessica's house, a neutral space chosen for its welcoming yet slightly formal atmosphere. Evelyn, with deliberate grace, took her usual place by the fireplace, in Arthur's favorite armchair. The scent of wood smoke, a faint memory from a past winter, seemed to infuse her with his quiet strength. Clara sat immediately beside her, a silent, unwavering pillar of support. Benjamin perched nervously on the edge of a sofa, while Charlotte, radiating an aura of barely contained impatience, settled into a fauteuil opposite them, an expectant, slightly smug expression on her face. Evelyn began, her voice steady and clear, carrying effortlessly across the room. 3 weeks ago, she started, her gaze sweeping across her children, lingering briefly on Charlotte. I gathered you all to distribute my assets. It was a decision made with love, with the intention of providing for your futures, and to honor your father's wish to give with warm hands. My only expectation in return was respect, and that I would be treated with dignity in my old age. Then, without another word, Evelyn reached into her elegant handbag and withdrew a stack of printed photographs. She passed them to Benjamin first. The images were stark. The twin bed, the tiny mini-fridge, the makeshift bathroom with its flimsy shower curtain, the concrete floor. Benjamin's eyes widened in shock, a flush rising on his neck. His face, usually so placid, contorted with a mixture of disbelief and horror. He passed them to Charlotte, who took them with a visible tightening of her jaw, her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. These, Evelyn continued, her voice unwavering, are my living quarters. This is how I have been living for the past 3 weeks. In the garage of the home I gifted to you, Charlotte. Charlotte opened her mouth to speak, but Evelyn raised a hand, silencing her. And now, she said, her eyes meeting Charlotte's with a steely resolve, I'd like to share something your father prepared. For a day, he foresaw. Evelyn then began to read excerpts from Arthur's letter, his words echoing through the quiet room, confirming his foresight, his understanding of Charlotte's ambition, and his protective love for Evelyn. She read the part about his deep love for Evelyn but also her trusting nature, and how he had made provisions. When she finished, the room was thick with silence, broken only by Benjamin's sudden, furious outburst. He sprang to his feet, his face red with a mixture of shame and anger. Charlotte, he roared, using her full name, a rarity, you put Mom in the garage. What the hell is wrong with you? Charlotte, momentarily stunned by Benjamin's rare display of anger, quickly regained her footing. Don't be dramatic, Benjamin, she snapped, turning on him. Mom needed less space. The garage was fixed up. It was perfectly adequate. She tried to rationalize, to diminish, to deflect. Evelyn cut through Charlotte's defensive bluster, her voice clear and firm. You installed a shower curtain and a toilet in the corner of a concrete room. Charlotte, she stated, her gaze fixed on her eldest daughter. You put in a mini-fridge and expected me to be grateful for being relegated to a space meant for cars and tools, not for my own mother. Benjamin, usually the quietest, the most conflict-averse, was now fully enraged. He stood, towering over Charlotte, his chest heaving. This is disgusting, Charlotte, he spat, his voice trembling with anger. Mom gave us everything, our entire inheritance, and you treated her like this? Like a servant? Like an unwanted burden? Charlotte's attempts to manipulate, to play the aggrieved daughter. We're family. Benjamin. We're looking out for Mom. Were met with Evelyn's steady, unblinking gaze. The old tricks wouldn't work anymore. With a final, decisive movement, Evelyn reached into her bag again, withdrawing the meticulously organized legal papers. She held them up, letting the rustle of the parchment underscore the gravity of her words. According to the terms of our original agreement, Evelyn announced, her voice resonating with an authority she hadn't known she possessed, specifically, page 4, paragraph 3, subsection B, which states that all transfers are contingent upon my continued well-being and respectful treatment by the beneficiaries. She paused, letting the words hang in the air, a silent prelude to the bombshell. I am, as of this moment, revoking the transfers. Charlotte's face, already pale with anger, drained of all color. Her mouth fell open in a silent gasp. "What?" she shrieked, her composure shattering completely. "This is a trick! You can't do that!" She snatched the documents from Evelyn's hand, her eyes frantically scanning the pages, desperately searching for some flaw, some loophole. Her frantic gaze finally landed on the highlighted clause, her face twisting in recognition and dawning horror. "I can, and I have," Evelyn confirmed, her voice utterly calm amidst Charlotte's rising panic. "Mr. Davies has already filed the initial paperwork, and for the record," she added, her gaze falling on Benjamin, who looked utterly lost, "the revocation applies to all transfers. To all of you." Charlotte let out a choked sound, a mixture of disbelief and utter terror. Benjamin, his anger replaced by stunned bewilderment, slowly sank back onto the sofa. "Wait," he stammered, his eyes wide. "You're taking back everything?" The silence that followed Evelyn's declaration was deafening, broken only by Charlotte's choked gasp. Her initial shock quickly morphed into explosive rage. "This is a sick test, isn't it?" Charlotte shrieked, her face contorted, pointing a trembling finger at Evelyn. "You planned this whole thing. You wanted to see if we'd pass some ridiculous loyalty test, didn't you, you manipulative old woman?" The accusation, flung with such venom, shattered Evelyn's last fragile illusion of Charlotte's love. There was no love, no respect, only resentment and entitlement. Evelyn met her daughter's fury with a steady gaze. "No, Charlotte," she stated, her voice firm, stripped of all emotion. "I gave you these gifts out of love, out of trust. I was wrong. I was terribly, painfully wrong about you." Charlotte's face, once vibrant with anger, slowly crumpled as the full weight of her loss settled upon her. The magnificent colonial, the symbol of her status, the envy of her friends, was slipping through her fingers. "No, Mom, please," she whimpered, her voice suddenly small and pleading. "You can't. Think of the children. Liam and Olivia. They love this house. Where will we go?" Her desperate words were laced with a fresh wave of manipulation, using her innocent grandchildren as shields. Evelyn's resolve, however, had been forged in the unforgiving cold of that garage. She remembered the shivers, the humiliation, the tears shed in solitude. "You should have thought of Liam and Olivia," she replied, her voice cold and unyielding, "before you relegated their grandmother to the garage. Before you changed the locks and stripped me of my dignity. You have 30 days to vacate the property, Charlotte." She softened her tone slightly, but maintained her boundary. "Liam and Olivia are always welcome at my home, Charlotte. Always. But I will not be manipulated through them." Charlotte let out a guttural cry of disbelief and rage, snatching up her handbag and storming out of Jessica's house, the front door slamming shut with a resounding finality. The quiet that descended upon the living room was profound. Benjamin, his face a mask of guilt and distress, turned to Evelyn. "Mom," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "I am so sorry. I had no idea. I should have checked on you more. I should have seen." He hung his head, clearly ashamed. Evelyn, exhausted but feeling an immense lightness, reached out and gently squeezed his arm. "It's all right, Benjamin," she said softly. "You know now. And now, I reclaim my life." Clara, tears streaming down her face, embraced Evelyn, a silent promise of unwavering support. The first week was difficult. Charlotte and David, fueled by anger and disbelief, packed their belongings with furious haste. The air around the colonial house crackled with their resentment. Clara, sensing Evelyn's need for companionship and support, insisted on staying with her in the garage for a few nights, lending her quiet strength. She witnessed firsthand the indignities Evelyn had endured, solidifying her own belief that Evelyn's actions were just. Then, a surprising sight. Benjamin arrived, not with legal documents, but with a large moving truck. He hadn't come to retrieve his own inheritance, but to help Evelyn. "Mom," he said, his eyes still holding a deep regret, Let me help you move your things to your new place. Evelyn, recognizing his genuine attempt to make amends, accepted his offer. With Benjamin's help and Clara's steadfast presence, Evelyn's few possessions were carefully transported to the modest, empty house on Willow Creek Road. Evelyn moved into her new home, bare but filled with the promise of a fresh start. With Clara's enthusiastic assistance, they began furnishing it, slowly transforming the empty rooms into a cozy, welcoming haven. Each new piece of furniture, each curtain hung, each potted plant placed, was a quiet triumph. A month later, Charlotte appeared at Evelyn's new doorstep. She looked disheveled, her usual polished demeanor replaced by a haggard desperation. "Mom," she pleaded, her voice hoarse. "Please, you have to give us the house back. We're in so much financial hardship. The children are miserable without their home." Evelyn, standing tall in her own doorway, felt no flicker of doubt. "Charlotte," she said, her voice calm and firm, "I did what I did because you showed me who you truly are. You revealed that you value property over people, over your own mother. You made your choices." Charlotte admitted she had made a mistake, that she regretted it. But Evelyn saw the desperation in her eyes, the underlying need for what she had lost, not a genuine remorse for how she had treated her mother. Evelyn calmly informed her that the colonial house was already listed for sale. "This isn't punishment, Charlotte," Evelyn stated, her voice quiet but resolute. "It's consequence. I am prioritizing my peace of mind, just as your father intended." Charlotte left, defeated, the door closing on a chapter of Evelyn's life that was now definitively over. Months passed. Evelyn flourished in her new life. She reconnected with old friends, joined a local gardening club, and began volunteering at the community library. Matthew, Arthur's quiet friend, became a regular visitor, his gentle company a welcome presence. Clara called daily, her voice filled with love and unwavering support. Even Liam and Olivia, missing their grandmother, started visiting Evelyn at her new cozy house, their laughter once again filling her home. A year after the fateful family meeting, Evelyn received a text from Charlotte. It was brief, tentative. "Mom, I'm seeing a therapist. I'd like to talk, if you're open to it." Evelyn read the message, a slow breath escaping her lips. She thought of Arthur, of his wisdom, of the strength she had found. She paused, then typed a reply. "Saturday, 2 p.m. I'll make tea." It wasn't an immediate forgiveness, nor a return to the past, but it was an opening, a cautious step towards a future where, perhaps, healing was possible. Evelyn realized she was stronger than she had ever thought, having learned to demand respect, to protect her heart, and to find her way back to herself, no matter the cost.